Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.
Welcome to Prairie Mosaic, a patchwork of stories about the people and places that contribute to the arts, culture, and history in our region.
Hi, I'm Bob Dambach.
And I'm Barb Gravel. On this edition of Prairie Mosaic, we'll learn about an influential politician in our region, hear the tale of a nun who helped lumberjacks get health care, and enjoy the sounds of gypsy jazz.
Poetry Out Loud is a contest that encourages the nation's youth to learn about great poetry. Before the preparations began for the 2014 North Dakota State Competition, 3 teachers from Bismarck High School talked about why they chose to include Poetry Out Loud as part of their courses and the benefits of memorizing and reciting poetry.
All right, here's a little bit about it. You have a very cool opportunity to compete in a Poetry Out Loud competition at BHS.
I think it's one of the most worthwhile programs available to students. It's accessible to every single student. It's available to teachers to implement in the classroom. You could do it as a school. There's so many avenues and possibilities with this program that make it worthwhile.
Oh, chimes sit high on the sunny tower. Ring on unendingly.
When I was in the 5th grade, my teacher, Sister Rita, made us all memorize a poem, and that poem has stuck with me ever since I was in the 5th grade. And I just always believe that it's important for someone, for everyone, to have a poem that they know. One poem, one piece that they can recite. And most of the students do pick poems that mean something personal to them, and that kind of helps that stay with them even longer.
I breathed a song into the air. It fell to earth, and I knew not where.
A lot of students today, we always have devices around, like an iPhone or a tablet, even a computer, that they basically memorize things for us. And when you memorize things or recite items, you use 3 main parts of your brain. You use the frontal lobe, which helps with organizing the thoughts. You use the temporal lobe, which helps with language and coding your message. And then you use the cerebellum, which is the rhythm and the flow of the piece. And so they're using critical thinking skills all simultaneously, and they don't even know it. And it's a good habit to do, and it's fun as well, using poetry to use as a tool.
You get 5 times in your life when it would help you to know a poem. And you can be funny, you can be serious, okay?
I also think it adds a lot of engagement with the text that you may not get if you just read or analyze a piece. They find a piece that is meaningful to them, that they have a connection to, and so they interact with that on a personal level rather than just on a surface level.
Look at the first line. Where's the consonants in the first line?
He just keeps saying sorry and stuff.
So I start off the unit by telling kids they have a chance to win $20,000. Now it's a pretty big carrot, and you got to jump through quite a few hoops to get there. But I hear several students saying, I'm really going to take this seriously, or I'm really going to try really hard at this, and showing them the national winners on video and their poem recitation of 2.5 minutes, and that's what you have to do. It makes it seem like it's achievable to them. So I think using that carrot is a pretty easy way to get them going.
I looked at it as a unique opportunity for the students as well. So many are involved with athletics and fine arts competition, and this was a way to implement a competition in the classroom, and they can benefit from it outside of the classroom as well. And so it just opened up the door to a lot of unique opportunities for them, and pushing them and challenging them also in a way that they may not do on their own.
Anybody can do it. Anybody can participate. It's not as hard as you think. I memorized a couple of poems just to prove to the students that it's possible. Even teachers can do it on a short notice, and I might not do it as well as the national champion, but it is possible.
When I behold upon the night's starred face, huge cloudy symbols of a high romance.
We do spend a lot of time on teaching them tips on how to memorize a piece, how to portray yourself in front of a crowd, stage presence, and once they realize that they've successfully done it once, and now in a competition atmosphere as well, I think they'll carry that success with them and use it their whole life.
Now, when we do our poems, it's not about movement and gestures. It's all about the voice. So when we look at poetry, we look at, the structure, the rhyme, the meter, the symbolism, and very analytical. And I feel like when we do that, students can have sort of a stagnant approach. And so I think doing something like Poetry Out Loud, where they're asked to stand up and recite and give that meaning, not through a written description, but through their vocal interpretation, I think that makes poetry come alive a little bit more for them.
You need to look at pop culture. We kind of talked a little bit about yesterday what pop culture is. Think of any TV shows or movies, or books for that matter, where a character recites a poem. I've dragged my feet for a few years now. I thought, oh, this would be a good idea to do. I'm just too busy. My advice is just do it. It's a lot of fun. It's very easy to implement into the classroom. There's a lot of great online resources. There's lesson plans that the Poetry Foundation has set up for you that you could use. And you can also tweak those lesson plans to fit your classroom as well.
Welcome to the 2014 North Dakota Poetry Out Loud semifinals competition.
Poetry chronicles our lives, and poems capture the essence of who we are as people.
White are my hands as the snowdrop.
Life is too strong for you.
Hope is the thing with feathers.
And that tradition, whether it's written or oral, needs to be passed on.
In 1893, northern Minnesota was experiencing a logging boom, but it was a dangerous industry. Back then, health insurance was in the form of health tickets. Sister Mackett sold these tickets to lumberjacks and quickly became known as Sister Lumberjack.
Sister Lumberjack could carry a man on her back, 6 foot 2 none, every pound hard won in the Minnesota outback. To lumber camps she tracked, through swamp wood and snowpack. She slept in thickets to sell health tickets to Pole, Serb, and Slovak. Several ton logs and an axe, your muscles overtaxed. You could lose a hand in a massive log jam, or cut off a finger. Infection can linger. Out of work in a flash, you'll soon be out of cash. Do they pay when you're sick in bed? So pay the doctor ahead. Buy a lumberjack ticket for $1 or $5. Free health care at the hospital, and you're sure to come back alive. Men loved it when she came back, slept in office or cook shack, said prayers with the men, carried letters for them, baked pies better than hardtack. She wouldn't take any flack, got every old greenback. She made each man pay if they tried to run away. She chased him with a poker smack. Several ton logs and an axe, your muscles overtaxed. You could lose a hand in a massive log jam, or cut off a finger. Infection can linger. Out of work in a flash, you'll soon be out of cash. Do they pay when you're sick in bed? So pay the doctor ahead. Buy a lumberjack ticket for $1 or $5. Free health care at the hospital, and you're sure to come back alive. When a log crushed a man with a crack, men stopped and stared, jaws slack. Sister took lead and made the men heed and saved the lumberjack. state took a new tack. Workers come for every hack. Our nun went home and remained loved and known as Sister Lumberjack, who put it all matter of fact: buy health tickets quick before you get sick and keep your family intact. Several ton logs and an axe, your muscles overtaxed. You could lose a hand in a massive log jam or cut off a finger. Infection can linger. Out of work in a flash, you'll soon be out of cash. Do they pay when you're sick in bed? So pay the doctor ahead. Buy a lumberjack ticket for $1 or $5. Free health care at the hospital, you're sure to come back alive. Free health care at the hospital, you're sure to come back alive. Free health care at the hospital, you're sure to come back alive. Free health care at the hospital, you're sure to come back alive.
At the turn of the 20th century, the Socialist Party established a strong foothold in Minnesota and North Dakota. But the party's lasting influence is not in the handful of local elections that it won, but in the ideas it sparked in nonpartisan league founder A.C. Townley.
The Socialist Party has an organization in 1913 in all the states, but the fact that the Socialist Party was interested in the urban proletariat made the Socialist Party kind of problematic for farmers. Farmers didn't see how any of their economic interests might be met. Townley gets involved in that effort, and he immediately develops a reputation within just weeks as someone who can speak to farmers as a former farmer himself. By 1914, he's starting to think about new ways of organizing. He's basically working for the Socialist Party in no small part because he needs a job. And he's walking from town to town. He's mostly, at that point, in western North Dakota, the spaces where these little towns are new and there's no easy way to get from one to the other except by walking. At one point he gets a bicycle. No doubt he thinks to himself, there's got to be a better way. He and a colleague named Albert Bowen end up in and around Bowman. And in Bowman, they're having conversations. There are some other socialists. They're thinking about what they could do to make this work of organizing for the Socialist Party easier in these rural districts. And they hit on the idea of an automobile. Townley grabs onto this idea, and they start canvassing western North Dakota. And what Townley offers these farmers as he travels from farm to farm, speaking to them individually, is an opportunity to be part of this organization department for $1 a year. It's a membership that's not a membership in the Socialist Party, but allows them to get certain forms of propaganda from the Socialist Party.
He's an original recruiter in that he asks for post-dated checks, and he sells socialism light as opposed to true socialism. You can see Marx and Lenin spinning when you talk about Townley. Just not exactly what they wanted as a super salesman. He ultimately gets canned from being a socialist recruiter and ends up going to watch the 1915 state legislature. And in the process, Townley and some of his friends sit down and start hammering out what they initially called the Farmers Nonpartisan League, which after a while becomes the Nonpartisan League.
Sometimes politics are led by charismatic leaders. And you had in A.C. Townley a charismatic leader, someone who knew how to organize. He forgot all about the Socialist Party once they fired him, but he didn't forget about the ideas.
And one of the first things that the brand new Nonpartisan League does before many people have heard about it is he starts buying automobiles. And he starts sending out organizers. Not only did Arthur Townley engage in direct instruction of organizers, but actually a correspondence course was created for organizers. So that as the league expanded into these other states and you couldn't have Arthur Townley or other league leaders training people individually, organizers could literally get lessons from the national office in St. Paul and figure out how to think about things, how to talk about things, how to approach farmers. What would often happen is an organizer would enter into a district and worked to identify at least 1 or 2 farmers that they knew would be amenable to the League idea and convince them to join the Nonpartisan League. Then they would take them in their automobile and have this person serve as a booster alongside them and go from farm to farm across these rural precincts and have that person help them sign up members. Now this was really important because, of course, rural America during this period, traveling salesmen are a dime a dozen. And farmers are used to having some random person come up the road and try to sell them something. And farmers, of course, have become, accordingly, quite cynical about your random visitor trying to sell you something. So when the League organizer brought one of your neighbors along, that was automatically a signal. Even before they got out of the car, it was a signal that this was something that you should pay attention to.
He understood that you had to build an organization by giving farmers a newspaper, and you give them entertainment, and you give them a sense of dynamism in campaigns. He was a person who was very modern in his campaign techniques. For instance, in Minnesota, he actually had candidates flying around by airplane. And so this kind of sense of excitement and creating an exciting campaign. In that sense, he was a lot like anybody who's involved in campaigns today.
In some ways, I like to think of Townley as an entrepreneur, as a person who thinks big, has big ideas, and is willing to put in the time to try to make them happen. And who has some ability to connect with others and convince them that this thing might happen.
A.C. Townley was one of the great organizers in American political history. His organizing techniques were taught to Princeton University undergraduates for a very long time by Stanley Kelly. He's a great political scientist, and I found this out talking to a political scientist who had gotten his PhD there, and he said, "Oh yeah, we've learned all about the North Dakota Nonpartisan League and how A.C. Townley figured out how to make an organization work."
At some point, you know, as a historian, you say, where would I have liked to have been? What would I have liked to have seen? I would have liked to have seen and heard the man speak in his prime. Apparently he could stir people.
Many millions of men, women, and children, and robbed half the world's people of all freedom and all property.
He could charm the birds out of the trees.
The Carlester Crumpleby Orchestra is a gypsy jazz group comprised of talented and accomplished musicians from the Fargo-Moorhead area. Their original music is influenced by Django Reinhardt, Stéphane Grappelli, and even Woody Allen.
Bistro Fada, one of the main themes of Woody Allen's great film Midnight in Paris. I absolutely loved that movie, and one day somebody posted him playing it on Facebook, and he tagged me and a bunch of other guitar players, and like, okay, who can learn it first? And so I learned it right away, and then I just absolutely fell in love with it.
If you know of an artist, a topic, or an organization in our region that you think would make for an interesting segment, please contact us at Prairie Mosaic at prairiepublic.org. I'm Bob Dambach.
And I'm Barb Gravel. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Prairie Mosaic.
Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.